Zoom as well. All right. IJ Makan is a designer, a philosopher, a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He is the podcast host. Oof. He is the podcast host. No, I'm starting over. IJ Makan is a designer, a philosopher, a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He is the podcast host of Kazingram Dialogue, and he is also the creator of a collection of NFTs known as Philosopher Kings. It's a collection of the most influential philosophers from ancient to modern day. Uh, IJ, welcome to Letters from a Contrarian.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks for coming and accepting. We've been trying to get this down for like 2 months, but I'm so glad that we're finally doing it now, and it's in the morning, but that's fine.
Man, I've been looking forward to it. I was thinking about how we connected, and I'm trying to remember what it was that we connect, how it is that I found you. I don't know if it was a tweet of yours that came up on my feed, and then and maybe it was the episode with Bruce Party, Professor Bruce Party. I don't know if that was what popped up, and then we connected. I DM'd you, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, we're talking. I was like, wow, it's crazy that you can meet. To me, it still shocks me that you can meet so many amazing people on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. For full context, from my perspective, I think I saw you in my follower list. Like, you just followed me, and then I clicked on you because you're always curious about who's following you. And then we were interested in the same thing. So you were into philosophy and crypto and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. I should DM him and see what happens. And then a couple of hours later, you DM me and you're like, political philosophy and crypto, dude, we should connect. And I was like, yes, making friends online. This is so amazing. I think that's going to be the default now, or that already is the default with people
Mm,
who are younger than 20, is you make friends first online and then you meet in real life.
yeah,
Whereas in the old world, you would meet people in real life first and then make them online or
that's
connect online.
yeah.
But super glad that we connected. It's awesome. It's good to know you, man.
Yeah, it's good to know you too.
So to get started, I'd like to hear a bit about you. Who are you? Where are you from? And what did you study?
Yeah, so I was born in India. I grew up there, and I belong to a tribe called Nagas, who are we're headhunters. And the last sub tribe that um, stopped the practice of headhunting was around 1963 or maybe even 1967. And headhunting, for anybody who doesn't know, it's not going around. Um, it's funny how my wife thought headhunting for a while was cannibalism. And she's like, you shouldn't tell people that your tribe's headhunters because they think you're cannibals, but that's not the definition. So headhunters essentially, the idea behind it is, when you're at war or when you're battling another tribe, other group, at the end of the fight and at the end of the battle, if you're doing a one-on-one, you would take the head off your enemies, because the belief, our tribal belief, is that the man's soul and his energy, his life force is in that head. So when you chop it off, you absorb that energy, and then you take it home to your house, and then you place it. And it's seen as the more heads that you have, the more heads that you collect, the more powerful you are inside of the community. And each time you get a head, you get a tattoo across your chest here. So there are, obviously men with like multiple tattoos because they've killed multiple guys, and so that's the Naga tribe. We're no longer headhunters. Most of them are now Christians. I think it's like 89%, 98% are Baptist Christians. Um, and yeah, so I was there, grew up during one of the longest civil unrest that's still ongoing in India. So in Montreal, they had the curfew. It's like you'd know better than me what the curfew was. I feel like back when I was growing up, it was very common. I think like the majority of my time there, the curfew was like 6 a.m. you could go out, and then 6 p.m. you had to be home. And then if you were out any time outside of that, there were police, army guys sort of marching. patrolling the streets. And then if you're caught, you would get punished, you'd get beat, you get fined, you'd have to do all these like weird punishments. So there was one example, I'll tell you a story of. So our house used to be just off the road, so you could see onto one of the main roads. And at night we would sort of like night watch, people doing illegal driving around. And there was this one time, two bikers drove through the road, and these police, they saw it. And so on the way back, these bikers, they put out a spike trap, right? So we were watching this whole thing, right? Put out a spike trap, and these bikers come back, they go over the spike trap, their bike like tumbles off the road, they fall down. That's like 5-6 cops. They come around, pick up the guys, and obviously these guys are injured, right? They're on a bike that went over the spike trap, and then the cops make them do frog jumps. Do you know what frog jumps are?
It's where and then you do a push-up, right?
Yeah, yes, kind of. So this frog jump, essentially, you hold your ears, okay, and you squat, and then you have to hop. And it's a punishment we had to do in school. So we're watching these grown men doing frog jumps, mandated by the cops. So that's just an example. So anyways, that's where I grew up. That's sort of the culture milieu that I'm familiar with. And then university, I did philosophy, and then in graduate school, I did my MA in philosophy, and then wanted to go into academia, changed my mind, and went into startups instead.
How did your experiences in India change or influence your philosophy and your views?
So, I mean, in India, it's sort of a hit or miss in terms of religious communities working together. There are places where they work perfectly fine. There are other places that don't. But oftentimes it's like when we were growing up, the religious tension was very strong. So when we grew up, it was the majority were Hindus, and we were the minority because we were Christians. And there's a lot of persecution that took place. Friends of ours who converted to Christianity from Hinduism, faced a lot of persecution from the family, physically assaulted, all that stuff. But then at times it would be, at times there would be no tension. So to me, one of the key times that there was no tension, when I look back and I remember, is during Christmas or during some of the Hindu holidays, or if there was the Muslim community in India is still, it's small, but it's obviously not tiny. So any of those religious holidays that took place, the other religious groups would celebrate in it. So if we had Christmas, obviously being a Christian holiday, the Hindus and the Muslims would go around wishing people Merry Christmas, right? Christians, Muslims, like everybody they would get presents. Somebody even get Christmas trees, like Hindus would get Christmas trees. And then when it was like Holi or Holi, a celebration of light, color, maybe it's color, I think it's color. Christians would participate. We have the ball that has colors, and then you throw each other and it sort of goes everywhere. And then when it's Diwali, everybody would celebrate Diwali. There was no sense of, this is my holiday, this is your holiday, we got to keep it separate. If you celebrate my holiday, it's cultural appropriation, all that nonsense that happens here. So to me, that was normal. That was normal. So I come here, and then I'm in grad school. This is the first time that when I was in grad school, it was Christmas, and I was just finishing up, done my papers, handed my stuff in, and I went up to one of the professors. I was like, hey, I hope you have a good holiday. Merry Christmas. And I'm about to walk out of the room, and she says, excuse me, IJ. So yeah, I don't celebrate Christmas, and I don't say Merry Christmas. It's Happy Holidays. And I was like, and I was there. She's a white woman, super progressive. And I was standing there thinking to myself, This woman, right, who's only grown up here, has no other context, is telling me that she got offended because I said Merry Christmas. And then I grew up in India where I could tell a Hindu friend Merry Christmas and be like, Merry Christmas, let's go. Here's a gift for you, right? Uh, so since then, I've noticed that trend becoming more common. You know, even as I moved, people would say, "Oh, Happy Holidays," and I'd say Merry Christmas, and they would look at me, um, okay, and or they wouldn't say anything. Or sometimes they'll say Happy Holidays, you know, as a reiteration of what they said. Yeah, so the influence of growing up in India is that I've seen a world where there's huge tribalistic tension, right, being in groups, and also at the same time, people, even though people are so siloed in their communities, when something big and celebratory happens, you get together. But here it's sort of the opposite, right? Everybody's open, right? There are no fences on the houses. Uh, your doors are generally unlocked. You can walk through doors, and there's that exudes, like Canadian culture exudes an idea, world of openness and welcomeness. But in practice, it doesn't always seem to be. It seems like in India, there's more welcomeness, even though it's more closed in many, many ways, right? There are fences on doors, locks on the houses. Yeah.
That reminds me a lot of something I went through in high school with the Italian club, where I was called a manja cake, which is
A manja cake?
it's called a manja cake. It's a derogatory term that you call someone who wants to become Italian. And I wouldn't say that I wanted to become Italian in Italian club in high school. I would say that I was obsessed with learning Italian and learning about the culture. And
Mm.
to do that, I tried to immerse myself in it as much as possible. But there were a whole bunch of kids who were like Canadian, but who had Italian parents and grandparents, and they considered themselves to be Italian. And that's why they considered me to not be Italian. Anyway, I graduate high school, I go live in Rome, and then I'm
Yeah.
talking in Italian with this Roman, and then I say like, "Oh God, I'm such a manja cake," and then she's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "You don't know what a manja cake is?" And then she's like, "No, no, I don't know." And then I explained it to her, and then she's like, "We don't have that term in Italy." And I think I realized, it took me a while, but I realized then that um, the use of the word manja cake by these children of Italian immigrants was a way of preserving their identity,
Yes.
because they are actually Canadians, but they're trying to grab onto whatever Italian identity that they have, or for me, it would be my Indian identity, because I think it's personally because Canadian identity is so vacuous. There's nothing to it, that the only thing you can default to is where your parents and grandparents are from and what their culture is, and so they feel threatened when there's someone else um, who and the idea of culture that they have is so skin deep, like, oh, we drink
Mm.
espresso in the morning and we have
Yes.
biscotti with it. Like, if that's all it takes to be Italian, then no wonder they would feel threatened if I started doing that too. But a true Italian doesn't feel like, the ones that I've met at least, and I've met a lot of them, they don't feel that by speaking Italian or by sharing their culture that you are somehow taking from them. Culture is not a zero sum game. And that is the biggest issue with cultural appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you cannot steal someone else's culture.
Mm.
Um, it's not zero sum, and so all it is a set of ideas that can spread, and it's sad to see how tribalistic we get with culture, because
Yeah.
we don't have one of our own in Canada, and
It's,
so we just
man,
latch on.
you said it so well. That is that the idea of preservation. Um, I refer it as artificial preservation of culture that takes place when an immigrant group, when a group leaves their native home and moves to a different nation, they do an artificial preservation of that culture. And you know, you see this sort of everywhere that has happened. Like Italians, even Nagas that moved to like the States or in Canada, they sort of falsely preserve this identity of what it means to be Naga, right? Eating a certain type of food you know, at a certain period of time. Or I think the most common one for us in Canada is the French. the French, the Quebecois, whose language. So I've been told, I don't speak French, but so I've been told by Parisian French people that that their French sounds like crap and it's old, and they're using words that the French in France stopped using a while ago. Um, but in Quebec, they had you everything has to be in French because they want to preserve the culture, the language, and it's the artificial preservation that's going on. And if you talk to, at least in my experience, if you talk to Canadians who are sort of taken by this idea that, oh, we have to preserve culture. And I have nothing against preserving culture. I think there are things about certain cultures that are beautiful and you can preserve it, but as a preserving it not to force it down other people, and preserving it not to make it not to put it up on a pedestal that nobody can use, nobody can draw from it, right? And there's another example that I'm thinking of is there's an Indian woman in BC. You'll find this funny, who's a chef, and this was a few years ago. She was very upset that people were making bone broth in a particular sub region of India where I forget how they make bone broth, but they're making bone broth soup. And she was upset that white Canadians were making bone broth soup the way that the sub-Indian culture was. And she said, this is cultural appropriation. This cannot be done. This is taking from my culture. And she, turns out, grew up here. Oh, sorry, she was born here. She grew up here, right? And she visited India, I don't know how many times. But it's like anybody else from India was like, yo, go for it. That's why in India, one of the funniest things to me is if you have a foreigner visiting India, right? Any foreigner can be white, can be black, can be blue, doesn't matter. They come to India, and if they come to a family, that embraces them. So if it's a friend that come, they'll shower you with. If it's a Hindu family, they'll do a whole celebration. They put the flower thing on you. They'll give you sari, like super nice sari. They might even give you some jewelry for you to wear, maybe some kurtas, all that stuff, right? And they expect these foreigners to wear it because for them, when you wear it, you're participating in the culture and you're sort of celebrating that culture. But here in Canada and the US, even, it's the opposite, right? You wear that, you're a straight up white person from somewhere in the boonies, and you wear a sari. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter if your friend gave you that sari who's Indian and they expected you to wear it. All of a sudden, you're committing cultural appropriation. It's you're defacing this culture's identity. As if identity is all caught up in one particular thing, right?
And I think the Steelman case for cultural appropriation is that you shouldn't be mocking other cultures. Um, like obviously, if you're wearing like a native headdress and you're running around with a bottle of alcohol and you're pretending to insult people and all of that, then that's extremely insulting and it is mocking. But um, in response to that, you should say like, "What the hell, dude? Like this isn't how you behave at all." But that's different from the idea that is put forward by the postmodernists who think that cultural appropriation is wrong. And it's sad to see. It's very ironic in that case with the Indian woman and the bone broth. She's using it as a way to preserve her own culture, because that's all she thinks her culture is Indian food and maybe language. But and and then with the white person who goes to India and wears a sari, it's like by holding on to your beliefs of cultural appropriation, that is you holding on to your culture and not accepting someone else's. Like it's it is in itself a form of culture. And so I think that it's quite arrogant and deaf and tone deaf for sure.
And one last thing, I think the important thing to realize is culture is any culture that exists is the result of borrowing it from a different culture, right? A culture prior to it. And the one thing to remember is each household has their own culture, even if you're from a mega culture, like a bigger culture. In India, it would be very rare for you to go into one household with six kids, a family of six, and then go into a different house with a family of 10, a poorer family, let's just say a poorer family somewhere in the village, those they have very two separate cultures. The uniting thing, let's say, would be their religion. But other than that, the way they practice certain holidays, the way they practice certain momentous um, days during the year, it would be very, very different. And so it baffles me that the cultural appropriation has taken such a high spot in society, and you know the legacy media and all majority of progressive love to call out cultural appropriation when they see it. And I know recently they called out some woman in a music video with Nicki Minaj for pretending to be black. I don't know what that means, but she was pretending. I think she was dressing up as like someone from the like a rapper lady, with like dreads. I think she was with dreads, and she was being called out because she was white. And I was there. I was thinking, what are we? What are we getting to that we're calling out these tiny, tiny things? Next
Yeah.
thing you know, we're going to be calling out people wearing pants. Like, okay, this is cultural appropriation. You can't wear pants. You can't wear high heels because the French royalty were the ones who created high heels for their.
Right.
I don't know.
It's kind of sad. Okay, so and in university you studied philosophy, specifically Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
Um, I haven't asked you this before. I hope you don't mind, but what would you say your religion is now? What are your religious views?
I am a. Um, I would. That's a good question to ask because I would say I am a heterodox Christian. So Orthodox
Okay,
Christian would be like the whole that'll hold to most points of the major Christian doctrines. I'm a heterodox Christian in that I have doubts about certain doctrines within Christianity that are like central to it. But in one sense, my my religious beliefs, my religious beliefs are the result of me having studied philosophy, and that is what's convinced me to stay religious. And then my heterodoxy comes from, I would say, partially from philosophy as well. So there's I would yeah. So I would say I'm a heterodox Christian in that sense because I know what an Orthodox Christian is because I studied it. In undergrad I did a double major. It was philosophy and biblical studies. So I studied Orthodox Christianity. So I know what an Orthodox Christian is historically. And so in in yeah, conscientiously I can't say that I'm an Orthodox Christian because I know what it is and I know that there are things I don't hold to. Yeah.
got
Does
you.
that answer your question? That's like a complicated way of answering your simple question.
So there's what you believe and then what you do as a person who believes. What would you say you do as a heterodox Christian? Maybe it is going to church once a week or giving 10% of your wages away. What would you say is it that you do that other people, an anthropologist would say, yeah, he's a Christian?
Oh, that he's a Christian. Just a okay. Like sociologically, I I'm doing armchair sociology here. I would say going to mass, um, or just like Sunday services,
Mhm.
tithing. I still I still give tithing. I'm still heavily involved. Like the majority, not majority, a lot of my friends who are Christians, I'm still very close with them, and we have theological, philosophical debates about my beliefs, right? And what else would it be? Praying. I still pray a lot. I would say reading scripture. I still read scripture. I still read theology. So like mainly like early church fathers who were more philosophically oriented than modern day theologians. So in terms of just from an outside perspective, everything about me hasn't really changed. The way my practices, I don't think has changed. My church attendance is not as consistent as it was before. Uh, I think that's for everyone now with COVID. But other than that, like yeah, other than that, the heterodoxy would come more from if we are having a conversation about, how certain doctrines work. Then I would have my doubts about it. Then I'd say, okay, well, I'll give you an example. Okay. One example that I'm extremely bearish on, to use crypto terms, extremely bearish on, is the idea that people say, "Oh, what's God's will?" I gotta pray and find out what God's will, and that sort of preoccupies a lot of religious people's mind. And if you have religious friends, you've probably heard them say, "Oh, I want to know what God's will is," blah blah blah. And I'm very doubtful of that, because I think a lot of that comes from people's own psychological inclinations to do certain things, and then they prescribe that as God's will, and then they do it. Now that's a very, very minor quip that I have, right? It's not necessarily unorthodox to have that view, but that's just a quip that I have that has become stronger as I've thought more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of bearish, let's start talking about crypto. How did you get into it? What drew you to it? And what is the promise that you think it has?
Yeah, I got into crypto in end of 2016, beginning of 2017, while I was in grad school, and I was on YouTube, and I was still sort of new in the world. I know YouTube at that point was like ancient, like it's been around for so long, but it was only at that point that I really started consuming YouTube and leveraging the content that's on YouTube for the betterment of my own soul. And I came across Vitalik Buterin, his his talk at TechCrunch, which is, I think, is like 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And he's talking about Ethereum as the decentralized computer, and Naval Ravikant, I believe, was the one who introduced him. And then they had that I believe they had a like a Q&A, I think, at the end. And I'm listening to it, and I'm saying decentralized computers, and you can build stuff on it, and everything's verified on the blockchain, and it's very hard to, you need a certain amount of agreement inside of the I suppose inside of the Ethereum DAO to reverse certain things. And at this point, I was already super into free speech and the importance of free speech in a liberal society. And my supervisor, Mark Mercer, who is I
Mark's your
believe he's
supervisor?
yeah, Mark
He's the head of the
Safs.
yeah. So
Yeah,
when I moved to Montreal, so my thesis supervisor when I was doing my BA is
yeah,
Andrew Irvin, and
yeah, yeah. Andrew
he's on
Irvin.
the committee, and he was close friends with Mark. And so
Yeah,
when I moved to Montreal, Andrew was like, "Hey, you should meet up with Mark." And I went over to Mark's place in Montreal, and we had uh, what are they called? Crepes avec like jam in them, and we just chatted. So what a small world! Wow.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah. So
that's so
that's it.
cool.
Yeah. So Mark and I have had many discussions about free speech and philosophy stuff. And before I joined, I didn't really know that Mark was super into free speech. I actually that's not true at all. I did. I knew. Um, I didn't know he was I don't think I knew he was the president of SAFs though, because I had read some of his articles on like the Canadian newspaper. I think it was like Globe and Mail or maybe like Ottawa Sun or something, or not Ottawa Citizen. And so at that point, I'd been thinking about free speech, because free speech to me is fundamental in a liberal society, in a democracy as a general whole. I have my quips about liberal societies, but as a general whole, I'm I'm a big free speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion supporter. And so I had been noticing people getting canceled, right? And this is like 2016. It's happening. It wasn't major. I don't think it was as major as it is now. And I think that's sort of um, accelerated by more people getting on social and finding all this stuff. So I had been trying to think of ways, like, what would the world look like if we just kept going this way? And I thought this would be a terrible world to live in, where all my chats, all my conversations, all my posting on social, 10 years, 20 years from now, when the culture changes, let's say the culture, there are I, there are things that we think are true and are not controversial now that 20 years is considered heresy, right? Let's say I suspect that one of them is going to be killing meat for your own food.
Yeah. Oh
That's going to
wow,
be considered.
that was on my mind too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's going to be one of them, and it's a cultural truth that's going to become a universal truth culturally. That's bound to happen. And so I was thinking, okay, what's this? What would this world look like? And I definitely don't want to live in this world because I'm thinking in my head. And then I come across this Vitalik guy who I hadn't heard zero about, and I watch this video and I think, well, that'd be crazy if you could build, you know, a DApp on his whatever Ethereum is, which I didn't know what it was, and then you couldn't get canceled because it's not centralized. Thought about it, kind of forgot about it because I was writing my thesis. And then in 2018, sorry, at the end of 2017, at the end of 2017, when the massive bull run happened, I got into crypto even more and I started learning about it, but I didn't have the conviction because it was still so new in my head because I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm thinking, okay, I got to have skin in the game, so I got to buy like just a tiny, tiny fraction of it just to see what it's like. And then once I got it, and then it was like CryptoKitties that was sort of booming up, and I thought, is this the only use case of Ethereum? After that,
What are CryptoKitties?
CryptoKitties are they're the first popular NFT project that was launched on the Ethereum blockchain, and they are cats, generative cats that can be bred and sold, and they have rarity scores, and that project essentially crashed the Ethereum mainnet in 2017, 2018, because there was just too many, and it was like yeah. So I got into crypto essentially through that Vitalik thing, and then now having since then, it's been a few years, I've become fully convicted of the power of crypto and how crypto can essentially change the way that we live in this world, right? It's going to be very hard to cancel people, and that's one. I think the other very important thing to me is with crypto, you'll see a rise in people owning their digital data, which we don't have right now, right? Nobody owns their digital data. Facebook owns everything; they sell it to marketers. Google owns your data; they sell to marketers, and you see zero of the profit, right? I think with crypto, you're going to see people having ownership of their digital data. There's a book, I'm trying to remember what the book is about. It's by a father and son. And in that book, I think it's like Blockchain Revolution might be the book. And they're talking about how you can see a world where there's, a world where crypto allows people to essentially have a black box, right? Where all their data feeds in, nobody can see it. And on the other end, our marketers, companies want to use their data for research. And then the person on the other end, the black box, says, okay, I'm going to release X amount of my information. And then for that, I'm going to take a cut. And then you sell it. But all your information's stored inside of the black box. And reading that book convinced me of how powerful crypto can get. And then Balaji, who I believe you also know, Balaji
Srinivasan.
Thank you, Srinivasan.
Yeah.
His crypto cities and the power of crypto cities, that was like, this all makes sense now. You could see a world where people vote with their money, and people vote. He has how to build a future city. You build in the cloud first, and then you work your way down and buy land. And that was, to me, it's like, that makes so much sense. All generation after us, their whole life is going to be digital, right? It's going to be very weird for them to not think that their life is not on digital, right? You and I became friends on the internet,
Right.
on the internet, which, our parents were like, are you sure you can trust people on the internet? And now we're like, yeah, let's hang out. Let's have a podcast conversation. Let's call each other. But that generation after us, that's the whole thing. Like Discord is popping off with Gen Z stuff. There are quite a few Discord groups that I'm part of. And it's like, it's as if you meet somebody, and then if you're part of the same community, you have the same, vision, then you're essentially creating. People are looking for community as we go digital, and as more people become less religious, they need to mimic what religion does in their lives, which is a community. Essentially, it's just a community, very strong community that's mission minded. And Discord groups that have NFT projects, or it could be anything. They're very mission minded and they have a sense of community. You could ask a question about life, right? Like, I'm thinking of, I don't know, I'm thinking of buying a house in this region. Does anybody live in this area, or is anybody a real estate agent that can help me out? And somebody's, for sure, if they're there, they'll be like, yep, I'm a real estate agent here, XYZ. This is my take on it. And then you can hop on a call and you have a whole conversation. Yeah, so I think crypto's gonna allow a world where it becomes uncancelable. You can be sort of pseudonymous. I don't think you can be fully anonymous, but you could be pseudonymous. It'll allow people to vote with their money better, right? If you have like Miami, Francis Suarez is, they have Miami coin now, right? And people can buy into that coin. I forget the tokenomics for it, but I don't know. I forget the tokenomics for how Miami coin works. But in the future, you could see where each city has their own token. So Ottawa could have a Ottawa coin, and if you move to Ottawa, then you get a certain amount of Ottawa coins. And obviously, just like how crypto works, the more projects that happen in Ottawa, building, if you're able to bring in more money into the city, whether that's businesses, VCs, startups, whatever it is, families, then the value of the Ottawa coin rises, and the holder of that, benefits. Right? I benefit from holding Ottawa coins, whereas right now I live in Ottawa. Shopify is booming. The Parliament Hill is booming with, they have all the money. They're spending like nobody's business. I'm profiting zero, right? Inflation's gone up, but if we had Ottawa coins, then I have an incentive to be like, okay, I'm going to make my city better. I'm going to help attract more, better businesses. I think there'd be a greater incentive to actually build your city up, as opposed to simply being on the losing end of living in a city.
Yeah. So just to drill down into, well, I want to say one thing about voting, and then I want to drill down into asking you how Ethereum and crypto prevents cancellation. But with voting, this is straight from Balaji Srinivasan, who, if you don't know who he is, just look up his name on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description below. But it's like the arguments he makes are so damn persuasive. It's shocking. So with voting, you can go to the ballot box, you can vote with your ballot, but then there's also voting with your money by paying lobbyists, by paying for political campaigns. And then there's voting with your feet. And I think voting with your feet is the most powerful thing you can do. It's the greatest repudiation of the way a country is run, to just emigrate out of it and move to a different one. And so I think that was in large part why I moved away from Montreal. I'm in Calgary right now. It was because I wanted to protest the curfew and the vaccine passport. And I thought that Alberta wouldn't bring in a vaccine passport system. And so, man, was I wrong. I thought that it would be politically untenable for Kenny to bring one in, because he had way too many people in his cabinet and in his party who were intolerant of the restrictions. And so then I booked my ticket, and then 15 days later, after I found a new place and all of that, he says, we're bringing one in, and don't get me wrong, like the restrictions in Alberta are looser than the restrictions in Quebec. And I think everyone makes fun of the name restriction exemption program, but it's honestly much more, as someone who's libertarian minded, I think that the assumptions behind the name matter, and his assumptions are more in tune with mine, where it's not about leaving you out of society like a passport does. It's about saying, if you are vaccinated, then you have fewer restrictions on you. I still disagree with it, but I think that at least the assumptions are better, and you aren't blocked out of society. So like, if I don't have a vaccine, if I don't show proof of my vaccination to a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu gym in Quebec, then they're not going to let me participate. If I don't show it to a place in Alberta, then I can still participate. I just have to socially distance 1 meter from everyone else and be with the same training partner.
Yeah,
Um,
which is better than not training at all,
exactly,
right?
exactly. And it leaves that option open. I think what'll probably start happening with gyms, if they get really serious with enforcing the restriction exemption program, is that um, they'll just have vaccinated classes and unvaccinated classes. And
Mm.
while that I don't like the idea of it, there's nothing wrong with it for me in principle, um, between separating the two if they are legally obliged to do so. But anyway,
So, I mean, the thing about voting with your feet is, and I believe we had connected right before you booked, or maybe right after you booked your ticket, right? Um, and 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 what that reminded me of is a situation where people will illegally cross the border in the United States, right? They know the risks involved in crossing the border, but the promise of a better life in the US versus staying in Mexico or wherever else, any of the um, poorer Latin American countries. For them, that's a risk worth taking. Crossing the desert, going across over the fence, all these, the security, the border security being there, and you saw this even with Hong Kong and China back, decades ago, where Chinese people were risking their lives crossing into Hong Kong to be in Hong Kong because they knew the opportunity there was greater. You see this with North Koreans leaving Korea, knowing that if they leave, right, if they leave North Korea, their whole family is going to suffer, whoever gets left behind. But they still do it, right? And the families who support them leaving, they do it knowing the full risk of what will happen to them if they stay behind. But they want their kids to not suffer in here anymore. And so voting with your feet, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to do things. And I think, in the States, we see it obviously with a ton of startups, VCs moving into Miami, Florida as a general whole. And then you see it moving away from California to Texas, Miami, like Nashville, North Carolina. Like they're also moving and they're voting with their feet because it's better. They have more incentive to leave California than to stay there. And I do think it will become more common. I know a few Canadians who've moved to the States as a result of the restrictions here. And I think North Americans are native North American, not native.
people
What would
born
be
here, not
people born?
Aboriginals.
Yeah. People born in North America have the privilege of doing that. Right? You can be Canadian, you can move to the States. American, you can be a bit more hard, a bit more difficult to move up to Canada, but you can move around wherever you please. But anybody else from like a developing world, it's if you want to move, if you're an Indian and you want to immigrate to the US, oh boy, it's tough. It's tough, right? Or if you want to move to the UK, it's even more difficult now. So voting with your feet, I think, historically has always been the way that people decide on which cities or city
Regime.
states will be successful.
Yep. The only issue that I've found, well, first, I'm 22 and I have no, like, I don't have kids going to a certain school. I don't have a husband who's going to work in a certain place and relies on the city for a career. So it's relatively easy for me to pick up my stuff and sell everything and move.
Yeah.
But even then, I think the biggest issue that I faced is losing all of my friends. Like,
Mm.
it takes a while to build up a network and to build connections in a new city and to develop deep relationships with people. And those are the ones that are the most meaningful. And then, like, if you pack up and move, then you lose all of those connections unless, and yeah, you lose all of those connections. It gets a lot weaker. I think the solution to this, though, is probably to do exactly what you said, which is to go onto Discord, meet new people there, and try and create a network of friends and people based on the internet, uh, rather than in real life. And that way your network will come with you wherever you go. It's
Mm-hmm.
not as good as a real life network, but if you have friends in every single major Canadian city, then in some sense, it doesn't matter where you move, you'll all be together. You'll always have someone there, and you can always meet up in person and eventually start your own city and buy a tract of land from a government.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point in that moving has the disadvantage of losing connection, real life connection. It's, because it's much easier to make friends in real life than on the internet, right? But that's not to say it's not that it's super difficult to make friends on the internet. It's just that in real life it's more human, right? Because you're interacting, your pheromones are interacting with each other. And there are like very subtle thing that happens when human and human interact. But the other thing is being able to maintain the friendships that you had previously in a different city or wherever else you moved from, and you as in general you is, you know friendship is the friendships you have, if you're able to maintain it, they compound over time. And the longer you're friends with somebody, the deeper your friendship can go. And not saying that all friendship goes down into the depths of the soul, but I think as a general whole, the longer you're friends with somebody and the more intentional you are with the friendship, the more value is probably not even the right word, the more beautiful the friendship becomes. And that's something where it's hard to put monetary value on a good friend, right? It's hard to say my friend's worth 1 Bitcoin. um, because friendship, if you have a good friend, they do way more than making you, giving you good advice, helping you out when you're moving. They do way more than that. They provide deep human connection that's intrinsic to being a human, which if you're not careful and you have multiple friends, if you have like, I have 100 best friends. Well, to me, if that somebody says that to me, I think, okay, they don't have any best friends.
Right.
Um, so
And another reason for why it's important to cultivate deep, meaningful friendships with people is because if you don't, then you start to rely on your love interest to fulfill
mm,
all of the needs that you have for connection. And I think that's a bad idea in the long run, because your expectations for someone are too high. And if you have lots of friends, then you can lower your expectations. It sounds kind of bad, but um, I think things will work more smoothly in your relationship if you have a network of friends that you can chat with, and you're not relying solely on one person to fulfill all of your emotional needs.
yeah, I think you 100%.
Okay. So are you good with time? Like, can we go for half an hour more?
Yeah, I'm good with time.
Okay, good. Sorry about this. We got kind of sidetracked on cultural appropriation and friends. My fault completely. So Ethereum, how does Ethereum, and just for context, Ethereum is known to be a currency just like Bitcoin, but what it really is like is a network, just like how the internet is a network. So you can think of it as like a third internet, so to speak. So how does Ethereum prevent cancellation?
Um, so this is where this is where my my hesitation with Ethereum comes. So Ethereum was hacked a few years ago. Again, a bunch of money was stolen from, I think, I'm trying to remember if it was a DEX, like a decentralized exchange, but a whole bunch of Ethereum was stolen. And when that happened, the Ethereum community got together and they wanted to decide what to do moving forward. Do they want to reverse? Do they want to reverse that stolen money? So go back in time or go back on the chain to a point when it wasn't stolen and then start afresh? Or do they keep going because the whole point of the blockchain was once it's written in code, you shouldn't take it back? What ended up happening was, it's Ethereum split. So you have Ethereum, the one where the price is right now is rocketing. It's like 3,700 or something. Um, and that's Vitalik still leading that. And then you got Ethereum Classic, and that it's named Classic because they considered it themselves to be the classic Ethereum, the one that didn't break the code. Code is law, right? In blockchain. So the one that didn't break the one that didn't break code and continued with the lost Ethereum. And so so with hesitation, I say you can't be canceled insofar as, in theory, you shouldn't be able to get canceled. But historically, with Ethereum, they did this one time, voting back and going back to a time when the Ethereum wasn't stolen. So, I mean, it is possible, but the main reason that you can't be canceled is because if your data is on a DApp, right? Let's say it's on a Twitter version of um, a Twitter version on the Ethereum blockchain. The Twitter version of the Ethereum blockchain presumably will have their own tokens, right? And every owner of that token, maybe they'll have a tokenomics where it's like you have to have 1,000 of our tokens to be on our DAO, which is our decentralized autonomous organization, and you can have voting power. But that DApp is decentralized. Like nobody owns that DApp. There's no one person sole owner of that DApp. So when you post things on it, you could essentially post things on it and know full well that no one person can go, okay, I don't like what Eugene is saying, so I'm just going to cancel him, just like they did with just a few days ago, the Palm podcast. Do you know the Palm podcast? So the Palm podcast got banned, permanently banned on YouTube when they
Oh yeah.
yeah, and that's obviously they revert that after Palm made a huge deal about it and everybody on the internet. But it turns out that it was this one guy or one girl, we don't know, that looked at Palm's videos and said, yeah, this goes against our I forget what the policy is, hateful and discriminatory policy or something, and we're going to cancel it. And it was just one guy, one button, boom. On dApps, that's not possible, right? It's not possible for somebody to just go in and vote, just go in and cancel you. You'd have to go through the DAO if it has a DAO. If not, then you're just going to stay there forever. What you say will stay there, and it's going to be recorded on the blockchain. So anything you say will always stay on the blockchain, unless they did a vote back and removed it the way that they previously did, which I don't think it'll happen again.
Right. So just to be clear, a DApp is like your personality, a personality online.
Sorry, no, Adapt is a decentralized app. So
Oh,
it'd be
okay.
like it's Adapt are applications built on the Ethereum blockchain, and the applications built on the Ethereum blockchain, they have certain utilities you can do. Right, there's certain things you can do with them, and so if you were a user of one of the dApps, it's hypothetically possible for you to get canceled and that you could be removed, but your content will stay on the dApp's chain, really, or until Ethereum crashes and it disappears.
Got you. Okay. All right. Let's see.
Um,
I'm looking through my questions. Sorry, give me 1 second. How on earth did you get Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami, famous person who's known for like recruiting half of Silicon Valley to come move to Miami because he tweets at them and he acts like a startup founder? How did you get him to follow you on Twitter?
I was DMing Francis Suarez, so we had a back and forth, and then he followed me. So I mean, that's essentially what happened. So I pinged him on Twitter, and I thought, I don't think he's going to see my tweet. And so that he's like, oh, DM me. So that I DM'd him. And then we just DM'd back and forth. And then he followed me. And I was like, oh, dang, Francis Suarez. So I don't know why he followed me. And so I was like, okay, I got to. At first, this is what always happens when somebody follows me. I think, man, now I have to be even more on my A
Yeah.
game. But then I realized after a while, it's like, if they want to follow me, they're following me. If they don't want to follow me, they'll unfollow me, which a lot of people will unfollow me after, like, I'll post something not controversial, but if I post something that's sort of like a bit of a hot take, then one person will unfollow me. Like we were talking about, you were asking me about my religious views. A few of my acquaintances who are Christians have unfollowed me after me having posted some hot takes about religious beliefs.
Mhm.
So I mean, it happens. So I don't know if Francis Suarez he sees my tweets or not, but he I was surprised by that follow myself.
So the lesson is to DM Francis Suarez. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be like, hey, what opportunities are there for Canadians who want to move to Miami? Are you able to
Oh,
have
do it.
like a I'm still gonna do it. Let's
Just
see
do
if
it.
he actually DMs me
Yeah.
back and follows me. If he does, that would be so cool. And it'll be all thanks to you. But only like to everyone who's listening to this podcast, you shouldn't do it too, because otherwise well, actually, I'm not gonna publish this for a while, so we'll be good.
Uh, yeah, it'd be too funny if like everybody started DMing him. Hey, what do you think about Canadians moving to Miami? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he tweets back at you if you tweet at him.
Okay. Um, so what's the fastest way to make money in crypto?
I mean, the fastest, most unsafe way. The fastest is the most risky way of making money, which I don't think anybody should do. Just putting it out there. Is to buy shit coins before it goes onto like Coin Market Cap or any of those big price, the ones that track prices. Because if you do like, that essentially like don't buy like Doge, Shiba Inu. Um, those have like crazy returns. Like Shiba Inu, I think last week, you know, it was like 0.000002 or 6 or something during September, and September was a bad time for all crypto, and it generally is historically. September is just a time when none of the coins perform, and Shiba Inu was one of them. And then October, I think it was like October 5th, or maybe, yeah, I think it was like October 5th or something around that time. Shiba Inu pumped to 200%, right? And it was just like out of the blue, it just went boom, 200%. People suspect it's like the Wall Street bet guys buying it. Who knows? But it peaked and then it kind of crashed. People lost, of course, and there are all those people who bought as it's dropping, thinking it's going to go up. They lost money. Another one that I saw yesterday. It's called, I think it's called like Floke Coins, like P or FOLK or PHOLK, Floke Coins, and it returned yesterday 300 and no yeah 322,000, or it's either 322,000 or 3,200%. It's one of those two. And I was looking at the chart and I was thinking, this is absolutely insane. And that would be the fastest way. If you had bought in before, it was publicly announced, you would have made a ton of money and you'd have sold. But I would say, not financial advice. Of course, none of this is financial advice. So
Yep.
don't buy any of those crappy coins. Bitcoin is the safest asset.
None of this is something that you
Fine.
should take as us recommending to you a certain financial product. If you have any questions about finances, you should speak to a financial advisor.
Exactly.
We're not qualified to give you that information. We don't have a fiduciary relationship with you whatsoever. So don't come after us at court. Don't blame us if you lose all of your money. My general sense is you should only invest what you're willing to lose.
Yep.
And you should probably only invest in things that you understand. Because if you don't, then you end up destabilizing the entirety of society, like how certain bankers did in the 2008 financial crisis. But this is just for educational purposes only. It's not
educational purposes only.
Yeah.
Nothing else. But I think in the long run, I think Bitcoin is the safest asset, right? It has 21 million supply, and they suspect that at least, I think the number changes depending on who you're talking to, but I think it's like 7 to I think it's like 7 million coins, or maybe it's slightly more, are completely lost or untouchable, in that either it got lost or it's locked up somewhere, which means that the total supply of Bitcoin is way less than 21 million. And now we've had, if you know Will Clemente, who's this 19-year-old guy, you should follow him on Twitter.
Okay.
This 19-year-old guy who's in the course of 2020 to 2021 has become quite well known in the space for doing like very good Bitcoin analytics and metrics that he's following. And one of the things that he has been harping about is during the bearish month of September, a bunch of whales. I believe whales are Bitcoin, are holders of Bitcoin with more than 1,000, or there might be sharks. I forget what it is.
They're
Whales might be
people.
10,000.
They're people with a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah, there are people with a lot of Bitcoin, and they had been buying up Bitcoin in September. They just kept buying, buying, buying. And so Will Clemente was saying, we're getting into a place where the Bitcoin supplies leaving the exchange is higher than the Bitcoin coming into the exchange, right? Because according to him, an indicator that Bitcoin's going to start selling off is when Bitcoin enters the centralized exchange like Coinbase, Kraken, CoinSquare, Binance, all these guys. When Bitcoin comes in, it means people are putting it in because they want to sell, right? Or they want to buy another asset. And so he was saying they're buying it up, right? These whales are buying tons and tons of Bitcoin, and they're taking it off the exchange, which means that there's going to be a supply shock. It's not going to be enough Bitcoin for the amount that people want. So, I mean, the SEC in the US just approved a Bitcoin ETF, maybe like last night or something, which more and more people are kind of getting into Bitcoin. I remember in 2017 talking to my family about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and everybody thought I was crazy, and I thought I thought I was crazy. And I thought, man, maybe I have really gone off the rocks here. There were times when I was like, yeah, I don't even know if I'm just being completely stupid and being so bullish on it. But yeah, it is crazy, the amount of nation states coming in and making Bitcoin legal tender, right?
El Salvador, now they bought 700 Bitcoin, which is, well, one Bitcoin right now is $60,000 US. So 700 of those is a lot. And then they gave 30 sats, I think, or like some fraction of a Bitcoin to each El Salvadorian citizen. And now that has grown by 5-10% in the past month. And
sure.
more people have Bitcoin wallets using the El Salvador Bitcoin app than people have bank accounts. And I was just looking, so like that's the promise there. It allows the unbanked to be banked. It allows people to access financial opportunities where maybe they were unlucky to have been born in a country rife with civil war and untrustworthy institutions and lots of corruption. They can exchange money with each other over the internet with no middleman, and they can also borrow and lend and save using crypto, and they can use institutions based in the US and Canada, like Celsius, for example.
Yeah, I mean, so El Salvador is one. Argentina is looking at it. Brazil is looking at it. And it wouldn't be surprising if, like, by 2022, a bunch of other countries, sovereign states, made Bitcoin legal tender, because they want to move away from the U.S. because the U.S. is printing money like nobody's business. And the other major sovereign that's looking at it is Russia. So I don't know, whenever this podcast gets released, Bitcoin's at 60,000. It only needs 5,000 more to break its all-time high. And if the suspicion is that, not the suspicion, the hypothesis right now is that if Bitcoin goes above 65,000, it's just going to rise like nobody's business, and it's going to go into the 100,000. Some people are even saying by by December 2021, Plan B is another guy you should follow if you're not following him.
Okay.
Plan B on Twitter, and Plan B essentially was the guest on Palm's podcast that essentially made him get banned. He came back, but Plan B is in the community very well known for accurately predicting all the Bitcoin highs, right? And his prediction, which kind of scares me, but his prediction is that in December of 2021, Bitcoin is going to be at 141,000. So think about that. If right now it's at 60,000 and people are still like, oh man, that's kind of too high. 43,000, it's like twice that. So whenever this podcast releases, maybe, if this gets released in a month in November, Bitcoin could be at like, 84,000. Who knows?
Right.
But yes, so Russia is looking at making Bitcoin legal tender because they want to. Yeah. So if that happens, obviously that's a huge country coming in, and there's even conversations happening about what happens if you sell, if the Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia decides to sell oil for Bitcoin, right?
Instead of the US dollar.
Instead of the US dollar. And all these things very possible. All these big financial advice, JP Morgan, who for years, railed on Bitcoin, this is stupid coin, this is stupid, this is just a bubble, now has come out and said, yes, Bitcoin is still very unpredictable, but you should, I'm paraphrasing him, but like you can hedge your bets on it. So like JP Morgan, who's very bearish on Bitcoin, Ray Dalio, who's bearish on Bitcoin, also changed his mind. So I don't know if people who aren't into crypto right now will most likely they'll end up regretting it because they'll feel like it's too late to enter the market. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time to be alive. One of the biggest asymmetric bets to make in life.
Absolutely. Okay, so invest in shitcoins. No, that's not what you're saying. Not at all.
Eugene and I come out with the coin.
We could, I'm actually trying to teach myself how to code just so I can fully understand what a blockchain is by creating my own. So we'll see. Maybe we might come out with a thing. And yesterday, a friend of mine, Steve, his episode hasn't been published. Today's October 16th. I'm going to publish this on like November 15th, probably. And I'll publish Steve's episode on November 1st, or October 30th. He just sent me a link to this website called DSO. Let me look it up. But basically what it allows you to do is to have your own token as a creator. And you can kind of invest in creators by buying their token. So like
I can have BitCloud?
I have no idea, but I will look up BitCloud now.
BitCloud is exactly what it sounds like. It's cloud.
Okay.
You can buy into your name, and then as your name gets more popular, the coin associated with your name obviously increases in price.
Okay, I will definitely look that up because, for getting into crypto, I think that I've told you this before. I think that the best way to do it, if you want to learn about it, is to put your skin in the game. Mm-hmm. And the way I started learning about it was I put in $100 into Newton, which is a cryptocurrency exchange in Canada. And I just saw that it would go up to 112 and then 94. And then I would start trying to sell high and buy low. Of course, that never worked out. So then you start to learn like, oh, maybe you should dollar cost average and just buy $5 of Bitcoin every day. Yeah. And you start to learn about the economics and the arguments behind it and all of that. And that's all from you investing a bit of your money into it, just to play with it.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, you started a collection of NFTs called Philosopher Kings. And that's basically, could you explain what it is and how it started?
Yeah. So the rationale behind starting it was that I wanted to understand the world of NFT. And NFT at this point I learned about it obviously through CryptoKitties was the first one, but after that I didn't really pay attention to NFTs. And then there was there's the NBA Top Shots that came out that sort of brought NFT into mainstream, even though it's obviously not mainstream at all. People bought into it, and then people started buying CryptoPunks, which you know CryptoPunks are going at an insane price, like absolutely berserk. I think one just sold for like $2 million. I mean, Ethereum, I think it would be 475 Ethereum, maybe a bit less.
Oh, sorry. Let me just interject quickly and say what NFTs are. They are basically, they're non-fungible tokens, but you know how on a computer you can just copy one image and then paste it, and then you have like two of it. And so in this situation, if you can just copy and paste infinitely, then your image doesn't have individual value. But if you look at something like the Mona Lisa, you can get an artist to make a copy of it that's quite accurate, or a piece of Monet's art. But that's not what gives it value. The value comes from it being created by a specific painter at a specific time period. And that's why a forgery isn't as valuable as the original Mona Lisa. So what Bitcoin, sorry, not what the blockchain enables is private property, because it says that this one thing belongs to this one person, and then it was transferred to someone else. So with NFTs, if you are sending a photo of yourself over Ethereum to someone else, if you're minting it, there's only one authentic version. And sure, you can download it and create a JPEG of it and then send the JPEG of it, but that's not the same as having the original. And what the blockchain does is lets you keep the original piece of art. And so that's what NFTs are usually used as right now. It's art. So sorry to
Yeah, no,
interrupt.
that's actually that's a good point of clarification to make. And it's in the art world. There's something known, so concept art are. So there's a difference between like paintings and concept arts, right? Concept arts are things like, do you remember the famous banana that was taped onto
Wall.
with duct tape that was taped on, and then somebody ate it and it was all over the internet? So essentially, that is a concept art, right? Because we know the banana is gonna rot over time the longer it is, and anybody can recreate that, because there's nothing to it. You just take a silver duct tape, put a yellow banana onto your wall, and boom, you have the same art as I forget what the artist's name is. It's called Comedian. The art piece is called Comedian. But the best way, but yeah. So if you understand the concept art, then the way the concept art works is the real owner of the comedian piece only has an certificate of authenticity, and that says that Eugene is the owner of Comedian, and for that reason, Eugene is able to take any banana, any silver duct tape, and put it on his wall and say this is the real one, because he has a certificate of authenticity, which in one sense it's hilarious that you just need this certificate. So that's the concept art. And so with NFTs, essentially it's the same thing, right? It's on the blockchain. You can verify that it's on the blockchain, and the potential for NFTs goes beyond art. I think it absolutely goes beyond art. And one of the biggest places, one of the most influential, I think, place that it's going to change is gaming, which this is not like a original thought of mine. But gaming right now is all owned by one company. Like Epic, for example, owns Fortnite, right? And Fortnite you can play Fortnite, but you don't get any money from it unless you compete. And to actually make serious money, you have to be like up in the top 0.01% of all Fortnite players to actually make money, unless you do Twitch streaming, which is also a lot of people to do it. But with NFT inside of gaming, there's this known as play to earn. So when you get into it, you own the characters inside of the game. Right? Like Axie Infinity being the most popular NFT game right now, is essentially a Pokemon version of a blockchain game. And so when you start playing Axie Infinity, you buy an Axie, right? And that Axie is yours. Everything about that Axie is yours and unique. And you're able to take that Axie, play inside of the game, battle other axes. If you win, you get money. You get love potions. I forget, like SPL or PSL, whatever token it is. And then you can convert that to an Axie coins, and then take that Axie and convert it to Ethereum, and you can actually get money. In the
And
Philippines, they're doing this, and people are making $2,000 a month in the Philippines. So if you think about how much money that is in a developing country, in a very poor region of that country, and they're making $2,000 playing this game, that's it's mind blowing. So to answer your question about NFT collection,
right.
I wanted to understand the space even more. So it's just like you. I wanted to have skin in the game, and the best way to do that is actually participating in the place in which you want to learn more about. So I created because one, I love philosophy. Two, I love painting. I used to paint a lot, and I thought I was going to be an artist when I was very young. And so I created this collection of philosophers who who are the most. It's all subjective at the end of the day, but who I think are the most influential philosophers of all time. So that's from like ancient, as far back as I can go, or I think I can go, to modern day. So we've had so far Marcus Aurelius, who I'm a big fan of. We've had Balaji. I made a Balaji one because I do think Balaji is going to be seen 100 years from now as one of the greatest philosophers of the 22nd century. We've had Aristotle. We have Confucius. And who was the last guy? Did I say 5 or 4?
I think you said 4.
I forget who the last one was. But we've had 5.
Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Balaji, Confucius,
Confucius. Oh, Nietzsche. Nietzsche
Nietzsche.
is the last one. Yeah. So, and the project is that I'm going to be releasing 5 philosophers every year, and there's 50. That means the last 5 are going to be available to be purchased in 2031. So it's a long-term project for me, and I made it that because I didn't want to come in and make quick buck and then leave, but I really wanted to understand, okay, how long. Most projects that are on that are doing NFT projects, I think will most likely fail, right? Either they're going to get rug pulled, so owners of the NFTs, creators of the NFTs are going to just disappear with the money and never come back, right? It's going to be a scam. So for me as a newcomer, I wanted to be like, okay, I come in, what can I create that essentially for the owner of whoever owns it, of the Philosopher Kings, they know that I'm going to be around for 10 years, right? 10 years, that's a long time. And so that was my way of saying, okay, if I release 5 every year, then they know that I'm going to be around until 2031, until the last one's released. And as I'm learning more about the space, I'm also going to add more utility to it. So it'd be like, I'm in the process of creating a merch shop that's only accessible if you can verify that you're an owner, and then you get access to a merch shop. And there's lots of utilities that I'm learning about. There are things which I'll tell you about off the podcast that I'm working on. That's not related to my particular project, but I'm leading another project, which I'll tell you about after we're not recording, because it's currently not officially announced. So the more I've learned about the space, the more I've realized, oh, okay, this is why NFT is going to change the way we buy, authenticate, show off. People are going to stop buying, Rolexes. All the early adopters of Ethereum, Ethereum is super cheap. When I learned about Ethereum, it was just like $77. If you had like $5,000 to spare and you bought 5,000 worth of Ethereum, you have a lot of coins. And so all these early adopters who bought it, when it was even lower than 77, they have so much Ethereum sitting around that now that Ethereum's at this insane price, it's probably going to, keep going in the next 10 years if it's around. Well, they don't like Rolexes. They're probably already into early tech adopters. They don't like Rolexes. They don't like Lambos. They don't like big houses. Their whole personality is all digital. So they want to flex digitally. And that's getting like crypto punks, Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, whatever utility tickets that's going to be around by artists. Um, yeah, so it's just gonna. It's crazy how early we are in this space. I have to sort of remind myself, when yesterday I was in an elevator and this guy had mentioned crypto in the elevator. I was like, yeah, and then he was like, yeah, every time I want to buy Bitcoin, the price is just insane. So I just have never got into it.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh man. I didn't say anything. I was like, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like to a certain extent, you can't do anything about people like that. You just gotta let them wallow in their regret, and then they'll regret it even more as time goes by. There's a tax that you pay for your inaction. Um,
I like that.
so I that wasn't me. That was like I got that from Twitter somewhere. But
I like that.
it's true. It's true.
Nice.
So yeah, like yeah.
What do you think
Okay.
about NFTs?
I don't know very much about them. I don't, like you were talking about CryptoPunks and the Bored Ape ones. The Bored Ape ones are very iconic. You can tell them when you're on Twitter and you see one. But like, I don't understand NFTs for the same reason that I don't understand modern art, in that it doesn't seem like the value of the artwork itself depends on the actual art. And for that reason, it bothers me, because I don't think anything else should be relevant. I think that modern art is probably a fabulous money laundering scheme where people can store assets, and NFTs will probably end up
Become
being
that way.
something similar, where
I think you're probably right about that.
right. And I wonder if they would be considered as like artwork or taxable things when you are doing your taxes. But good thing governments are like 50 years behind on everything happening in the crypto world.
Yeah, there's a guy that I know who's an owner of a Bored Ape. Yeah, it's a Bored Ape, and somebody bid like I think 400 Ethereum on his Bored Ape, and he was like, not selling. I was like, holy crap, 400 Ethereum, and this guy's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna sell.
Yeah.
Presumably, like, the next time there's a huge, I'm sure next time there's a huge bull run, or if Ethereum continues to be the way it is, I'm sure it's going to be worth way more than $400, 400 Ethereum. So, but it is kind of crazy to me how people have changed. There are people who've quit their full-time 9 to 5 to go full-time into NFT, not creating NFTs, but they're known as NFT flippers.
Yeah. So how do they flip NFTs? How do you make money with NFTs?
With NFT? Yeah. So they use quite a few tools. So one of the tools is Nansen, right? NANSCN.ai. And Nansen essentially allows you to track big wallets, big Ethereum wallets, and see what they're purchasing ahead of everybody else, right? If you have Nansen, the Nansen analytics, then you can see who's buying what project. And so these guys, these flippers, they keep an eye out, using tools like Nansen, using tools like Rarity tools, and look at projects that have a big community or no community, or looking at an artist, and then seeing which wallets are purchased buying into these projects. And so these flippers will come in and buy, so essentially follow the trend early on, these big wallets, buy a whole bunch, right? If it's a collection of 9,999, then let's say they get their hands on 7 pieces. So these flippers come in, they buy it at a low price of, let's say, 0.08 Ethereum, which is probably like, I don't know, I want to guess like $700, no, $600. I'm guessing at this point, but somewhere around there. They come in, they make an investment of, a few $100 or maybe a few $1,000. And then because they were early on by looking at these tools, when the rest of the community, who are essentially just, your normal, who's not normal, but your normal
Average
and
Ethereum citizen.
yes, average Ethereum citizen, when they find out the project, the floor price of these projects have gone up. Floor price meaning the lowest bid price on one of the NFTs. So as the floor price increases, these NFT flippers, depending on if they have a rare one or a or unrare one, they'll sell it for, you know, whatever. So they could sell for like 1 Ethereum. If you bought it at, even if you bought it at point 1 Ethereum and you sold at 1 Ethereum, that's huge profit. So these flippers do this, right? And there are a few people on Twitter who I follow and I've spoken with. They just quit their job, like straight up quit their job, and this is all they're doing. All they're doing is looking at projects, buying into these projects early on, and then sort of hoping, sort of guessing, sort of knowing some of these projects are going to go berserk, and then they just flip it. And some are making an insane amount of money doing it. I don't know how they do their taxes. I don't even know if it's, yeah, I have no clue. But yeah, it's kind of insane what's happening.
We're in uncharted territory. Maybe what one thing that I should do, if it's possible, is to invite someone on from the government to be like, hey, like this is happening, whether you like it or not. Can we chat about this? And can I try and convince you that an NFT should be considered as like an art form rather than a piece of art rather than like something that you should tax or something like that? Anyway.
Yeah, I would suspect it's probably going to turn into an art because there's so many artists on it. I don't know if you follow. Do you know Ferocious? Oh, okay, so I hope I'm saying Ferocious name correctly. It's like Fewwious, Ferocious, and Ferocious is like I think name is Victor, 18 or 16-year-old kid who joined NFTs early on in March, I believe. And now just yesterday or 2 days ago, one of his pieces sold at Christie's auction house, which is a huge art auction place, for $2 million. $2 million. This guy, Ferocious, joined. He's been painting for, I think, since he was a kid, but he only, hit NFT world in March. And the most that he had, I believe I was listening to one of his interviews, and the most he had sold for one of his pieces was, I think, $100. And now, 6 months later, one of his pieces is gone for $2 million, which, I would suspect he's probably one of the our modern day Picasso version of a modern day Picasso, depending on if they continue painting.
Okay, so I should start to wrap it up because I want to try and, oh boy, and we'll start to wrap it up now. What's the fastest way to turn a JPEG into an NFT and sell it? And the reason I'm asking this is because the best way to learn is through skin in the game, and in theory, well, and in practice, as you've demonstrated, if you do something and make something, then you'll understand it from a deeper level. So how would you go about turning a photo that you have into an NFT?
If it's just a photo, let's just say you have a photo. Let's say it's a collection of photos that you've taken
Sure.
of the cosmos, right? With your super cool ass phone, camera, and it's like the Milky Way, and like a series of six. Essentially, the best way to do is, one, you own Ethereum. Wherever you buy it, you send that Ethereum to a MetaMask wallet. There's going to be a gas fee for sending it, and then once you send it into a MetaMask wallet, you go to OpenSea. I forget if the official is OpenSea.io, but OpenSea. You could just go to OpenSea, and then you click Connect Wallet. Once you've created a wallet, and the beautiful thing about Web3 is that you don't need your email, you don't need to create a new password, none of that crap. You just kind of go and you click Connect Wallet, and you get connected. Once you get connected, you click create a collection. You upload your photos on it, and the first time you mint it, you have to pay a gas fee. Just the first time you mint on OpenSea, you have to pay a gas fee. Once you pay the gas fee, you can either auction it at a starting bidding price, or you can do a Dutch auction, I believe, which is a decreasing. If nobody buys it, then the price drops. Or you can
Sounds kind of sad. Poor Dutch people.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you can just list it at a particular price, and then you can list it as an Ethereum, like an ETH, or a wrapped ETH, which is a WETH, or you can list it inside a Polygon and then you list it, and then yeah, depending on how you've listed it, somebody bids on it, you can accept the bid. Nobody bids on it, obviously it just kind of stays there. And bid has a time limit, like 7 days, I believe, the average one. Or if you just list it, if somebody decides to purchase your NFT just there and then because you've listed it for, let's say, 1 Ethereum, the moment they click buy now, you can't say I don't want to sell this to you. And that's the beautiful thing, right? The moment one person exchanges their Ethereum to purchase yours, there's no way for you to cheat them out of it. Like the whole thing transfers over completely. Even if your project closes down, that NFT it lives inside of this person's wallet. And then yeah, and then once you've sold it, and you can put some more stuff. There's also, yeah, you can sell it on multiple platforms.
How much would you estimate this would cost? Today's like October 16th. How much would you estimate this would probably cost to upload a series of photos?
Oh, um,
Mostly in gas fees, I guess.
gas fees, yes. I suspect the gas fees probably right now on OpenSea hovering. I'm obviously taking a guess here, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 100 $150,
Okay, in
which
total
is,
to put this all up there.
yeah. So you have the mint fee. Yeah, the mint fee is just like one-time minting fee, and then once you've minted once, you can continue minting, but you just have to pay that upfront gas. And yeah, so maybe like overall purchasing Ethereum, sending it to your MetaMask wallet, because you have to pay fees, gas fees between sending it from your exchange to your MetaMask. Probably like safe bet would be like $300.
Wow.
That's a
Okay.
safe bet. That's like a high estimate. There's
Right.
probably less.
Okay. So and how would you, so you have a collection. How are you selling that? How are you advertising it? How are you marketing it? How are you trying to get the money to go above and hopefully turn a profit?
Yeah, I'm not. So I'll be very honest. I'm not creating it. I haven't created it. The goal was not to make profit. So, um, all the ones have sold for like 0.03 Ethereum. The ones that have sold for that price. Um, and so there's a Twitter account. I think it's Philosophers NFT.
Wait, hold on. 0.03 Ethereum is
Sorry,
1,500 Canadian
my bad,
dollars.
my bad. Yeah, that's right. 0.03. 0.03.
You sold it for $1,500?
No, that's not. No, that would be 0.3. It's 0.03. So it's like
Oh,
$100.
0.03. Sorry.
Yeah, like 120
Oh,
bucks maybe.
okay. So 150.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And um, yeah, so there's a Twitter account that I sort of manage, which I haven't done a terribly good job right now at it. But essentially, a lot of the people who own it came through that Twitter. Like people who are following me bought it through that. And essentially, each owner, there's an unlockable feature, and each owner has a little PNG file that they can download, and they can make it to their Twitter profile. Yeah, so it's going to keep going for for another 10 years. So I have most of the philosophers listed onto who the 50 philosophers are. There's still, I think, probably like 10 missing that I want to fill in. And yeah, I don't know about the pricing. I listed it. First time was a bid, second time was a list, third time, and fourth time, yeah, the last time was a listing. So it's just listed up, and whoever wants to get it, they can get it. There's no bid.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Let's see. I wanted to go through your podcast. I wanted to go through Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I wanted to ask you how listeners can support you. I'll try and mush them together. So, in your spare time, you have a podcast. You have, and you're a instructor of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. With your podcast, what's it called? What's the pitch to someone who's, well, I said it at the beginning, but what's the pitch to someone who's listening to mine who would probably be interested in the stuff you talk about too?
Yeah, so Casino Dialogue podcast is where we have honest conversations about the most important things in culture, philosophy, science, and religion. That's essentially, I would say, the elevator pitch. So it's honest conversations that I felt I couldn't have in academia because it was deemed inappropriate, highly controversial, offensive. Not that I say anything offensive on it, but it's just considered offensive by hardcore progressives. And so conversations about that, conversations that even within religious communities, they sort of avoid. So one conversation that a lot of religious communities will avoid is topic of psychedelics, right? Oh, we can't do this. Don't talk about this. And psychedelics are very interesting to me. And we had a acquaintance, Michael Adam Ferguson, who's a instructor at Harvard in their medical school, and he had done some. He's like a neuroscientist, so he was telling me about the research happening within psychedelics, and then on, this was probably 3 years ago. That's essentially turned me on into psychedelics, and I wanted to learn more about that space. So that's a topic that's not really talked about. So another topic that's sort of controversial is the indigenous conversation in Canada and the U.S. Right? There's only one narrative that you can sort of fall under, and if you sort of deviate or question that narrative, then it's considered highly, highly heretical.
Yep.
So, we had Frances Widdowson, who's one of the most controversial person on, and people I know called me racist for talking to her, right? For simply talking to Frances. So there are things, yeah. So there are just honest conversations that people are afraid to have, and conversations that people are afraid to opine about or actually give their honest thoughts about. So I try to make the conversation just like how we're doing this conversation. It's sort of, it flows, and my goal is to essentially bring up the real person on the other side. The real thoughts, not this facade that they put on to impress people, to impress a group. I want to know what they're thinking about about the questions that we're talking about.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. I already want to listen to your interview with Frances Widdowson. I have heard her speak before many years ago, but it's interesting. And I think that the more we move forward, the more the more Canada moves forward, the more an appreciation for Indigenous identity will start to become our identity. And I don't know, I react to that initially with suspicion, because it's not, Indigenous identity is not the same as Canadian identity. And there are places where Indigenous thought and belief clash with Western thought and belief. Like, for example, when did Indigenous people come to North America?
Yep.
There are two answers to that, but only one is scientific or based in empirical evidence. So, and then the whole residential school thing, which I think was really sad and atrocious. To what extent is every single person associated with residential schools guilty? If you start off with the presumption of innocence, then you have to have like a nuanced discussion about that. Anyway, all this to say that I need to spend more time looking into it. And I think as we go forward, more time will be necessary to have a position on it at all before one side of the narrative completely takes over.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
There's you had previously mentioned at the beginning of a conversation, Canadians lacking a sort of identity, and I think that has become very evident in me that Canada lacks a myth about itself. Whether the myth is true or not, right? It just lacks a cohesive myth that spurs Canadians on. And I say that with the US. The US has a myth that they all love, right? That's what makes the US. As somebody who grew up in India, all I wanted to do was go to the US. Like, I was like, movies, everything about the US was freedom, liberty. What is it? What's their three things?
Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
Yes, those. And that's a myth that you're told in school, your family tells you. And part of that is we fought the British. They were tyrannical. We fought them with our own guns, with our own hands. However that story actually plays out, like the nuances of that, that's beside the point. But Canadians lack that, right? It's more like, yeah, we We helped the British fight off the US, and we got together. A bunch of people got together for a meeting, and we said, "Hey, we should actually join our provinces together." Yep, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the US is like, I'm not gonna swear, but f you, f you Brits. Let's make our own thing, with all our flaws. But that myth is missing. You need a myth as a nation, as a family, as a person that you can sort of fall under, and that essentially drives the way you perceive reality.
Yep. And right now, that myth is starting to turn into Canada as a genocidal state. We killed all of our Indigenous people, and all of our institutions are based on that initial murder and genocide and theft of land and stealing. I don't think that's a good way to, it's not a good foot to set to start out a country on. And yeah, aside from that, to compete with that, there's the idea of that Canada was founded by two nations. Anyway, yes, thank you. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, when and why? When did you start Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? Why? And what benefits have you found? How have you found it has changed your life?
I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu 3 years ago. I'll keep it short because we're wrapping up. 3 years ago, I started it because I never did martial arts when I was growing up. Was not allowed to do it. It was banned we were banned from practicing it of any form of martial arts. And so, when I moved here, I moved away, got married. I wanted something that provided me with not only something I could learn, but had direct impact on the way I lived, and in the event that something were to happen. And I found that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, through as I was doing research, probably is one of the best. It is the best form of self-defense martial arts you can learn. Obviously, there are lots of critics who will say, "Oh, but what were you going to do if 3 people attack you, IJ? Are you going to?" Of course, if 3 people attack me, I'm going to run. Right? But if it's just a one-on-one, generally all street fights happen on the ground. If you know how to grapple on the ground, if you know how to take your opponent on the ground down, it's fairly simple to restrain a resisting opponent who has no training. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu not only has that practical aspect, like when you're actually walking on the streets, you know that if a fight were to happen, you could, for the most part, handle yourself, depending on whether you got hit or like a blind side, right? You got a hook blind side. So the benefits of that, besides the practicality of it, is there's a great sense of confidence that arises within knowing that you could essentially manipulate a resisting human body, for the most part, any size. Obviously, once it gets into like 7 foot, 400 pounds, it's going to get a bit hard, right? As somebody who's like 5'11" and under 180 pounds. So the confidence that comes it's unprecedented. Like there's nothing that I mean, that's not true, but it's one of the only things that provides you with confidence. That's not like, oh, I'm exuding a fake machoism. It's like, I'm confident. I know what I can do. So I'm not out there looking for fights. I know people who practice martial arts and will look for fights. I'm just more oriented towards not fighting at all. And so now I can honestly say I don't want to fight because I could potentially you could potentially get harmed in right. That you could lose. Not that I would kill them, but you could get harmed. I don't want anybody to get harmed. Let's not fight. There's been like four times in Ottawa, random people came up to me wanting to fight me, right? It's like, hey, you want to fight? And I'll say things like, hey, Kung Fu, let's fight. You're Chinese, let's fight. You're like, I don't want to fight. And they're drunk.
Right.
So yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just a systematic approach to dominating your opponent and isolating their limbs to apply breaking force or strangling them.
Thank you, Mr. Danaher. Yeah. Okay. Confidence and competence in human bodies.
Yeah.
Okay. How can a listener support you? And do you have any? No. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, that's I enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
And how can someone support you?
I mean, they can listen to Kazingam Dialogue podcast. It's KZINGRAM podcast, and just like you can find Letters of a Contrarian on all the platforms, you can find Kazingam Dialogue on all the podcasts. We have a YouTube channel that I've yet to upload the last 2 episodes on, but YouTube channel. My co-host Amos Dober, he's a very smart guy, and he was the one who told me, "Hey, we should put it on YouTube." So there's YouTube, and you can go on the website kazingram.com. I'm on Twitter. That's how I obviously connected with Eugene, so you can follow me on Twitter. And
DM IJ everyone.
yeah,
It's worth
exactly.
it.
Exactly. Yeah, that would
Awesome.
be it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Letters from a Contrarian and sharing all of that information on crypto and how to get into it and how to DM Francis Suarez and get him to follow you. I think this will do a lot of good in the world.
Well, thanks for having me on, and we're gonna have to do the opposite now.
Sure, for sure.